Hello, I'm John Nicholson and thank you for joining me here on my YouTube channel. I thought this week we would talk about Donald Trump, your favourite American politician. And it's been a busy week for Trump because it looks as if the American courts, American judges, have finally decided to offer some resistance to him. If you follow me here on a regular basis, you know I've talked about what a perilous time I think this is for American democracy. I've followed American politics for a long time. I've worked in the Senate as a speechwriter. But my first experience of America was winning a scholarship to go to Harvard. And I thought we could talk about what Trump is doing with the American universities at the moment and just how dangerous it is. Donald Trump has an obsession with Harvard. Harvard is now under attack. He's withdrawn some funding from Harvard. He's announced as well that Harvard can no longer recruit foreign students, and the courts look set to try their best to block Donald Trump over his obsession with Harvard. But more on that in a second. A lot of people will think of Harvard as an incredibly elite place, and of course it is. Harvard is hard to get into. A lot of people assume that you have to be incredibly rich to go there, but Harvard allows more than half the students that it allows into the university to go there without paying any fees at all. And I was one of them. I'm the first generation in my family to go to university. My grandma left school at 12 and worked in service, and my mum left school at 14 and she worked in the post office. And so for me to go to university was a really big deal in my family. I went to Glasgow University, that was my first university, and it really changed the course of my life. For many people of my generation, university had a transformative effect. It was also free in Scotland. You didn't have to pay any tuition fees. You still don't have to pay any tuition fees in Scotland. And I can imagine how that sounds to those of you watching in England and elsewhere where fees are enormous. But in Scotland, you can become a doctor, be there for 5 years. An architect, you can go for 7 years and not have to pay a penny in fees. For me, it was an incredible experience. I had the most remarkable teachers. Philip Hobsbawm taught me literature. Eddie Morgan, who went on to become Scotland's Macker. He was my university lecturer. It was an extraordinary time, and I hadn't done well at school because I was pretty bored at school, but at university I just found my world and just loved it. And I did student debating, went across to America, really loved being there, and decided to apply for some scholarships. I won a Kennedy Scholarship, I won a Harkness Fellowship, and I got into Harvard and then went to Harvard. It was an incredible experience. The great Seamus Heaney, the great Irish poet, was one of my tutors. Can you just imagine how exciting that was? Richard Neustadt, a philosopher, was another one of my lecturers as well, which was remarkable. Richard Marius, who wrote a landmark book on Thomas More, he was also one of my tutors, and we became friends. And Harvard had a great system as well. If you were a young student from overseas, you would have a mentor, somebody who would look after you and give you either a bit of family experience. You could go back to their house and have dinner with their families if you were far away from home and feeling a bit lonely, or they would take you out for a dinner. It was a really great system. And my mentor was a man called Howard Simons, who'd been the managing editor of the Washington Post at the time of Watergate. He was the person who came up with that phrase, deep throat, for the person who was hiding in the underground car park, who was leaking Washington Post journalists, Woodward and Bernstein, the secrets that the White House under Nixon was trying to hide. It was a magical time for me, and it was free of charge. So I was one of those foreign students that so exercise and upset Donald Trump. Now, the thing about Harvard is that Harvard raises to a pinnacle free speech. You're allowed to say anything that you like, within the confines of the law and hate speech, of course, but you're allowed to say what you like. You're allowed to voice opinions that differ from your lecturer's opinions, the same way you could, of course, at Glasgow. And what's so disturbing about Trump is that he feels threatened by free speech. Now, one of the arguments that the MAGA lot, the Make America Great Again lot, used to use was that campuses stamped down on unpopular opinion. And they said that, if you're on the political right, you weren't allowed to express your opinions. But of course, what Donald Trump has done is to turn that on its head and say that if you have progressive views of any kind, you're not allowed to express them, especially if you're a foreign student. Now, he's done yet another of his reverses today, possibly looking at defeat in the courts. And he said that a smaller number of foreign students should be allowed to go to Harvard, but those who go there should love America. Now, what's interesting about that is he is doing what fascist dictators have done throughout history. He is conflating loving him with loving America. It is, of course, perfectly possible to love America without loving Donald Trump. It's possible to respect America, its culture, its heritage, its history, but also to dislike what Donald Trump stands for. And foreign students attending college in America should be entitled to be as critical of the United States as people who live in America. There shouldn't be two categories of students, those who are free to speak, Americans, and those who are not free to speak, those attending American universities from other countries. Once again, there are sinister echoes of totalitarianism, both in Europe in the 1930s, South America more recently, in the way that Trump looks at judges as the enemy. He looks at campuses as the enemy. He looks at students as the enemy, and he is really threatened by free speech. So I very much hope that Harvard continues to do what it's doing at the moment, which is to stand up against Donald Trump, to refuse to be intimidated. And Harvard is in a strong position to stand its ground because it's an immensely wealthy institution. It's been left numerous small fortunes by different benefactors over the centuries. So Harvard is a wealthy place. That's why it can afford to offer so many scholarships to students from disadvantaged backgrounds, either in the United States or from overseas. And Harvard must stand up as a beacon of freedom of speech. It is everything that Donald Trump hates. So here's to Harvard. Here's to free speech. Here's to independent judges, and here's to Donald Trump being defeated in the courts. Thank you so much for listening. As always, I'd love it if you would subscribe to my channel. It's absolutely free of charge. You can see the details here. Please do subscribe, and please give me your comments below. I always enjoy hearing from you, and I always try and answer as many comments as I can. Thank you for watching.